Can space be a new pharma platform? It is a question that honestly sounds a bit like science fiction. But as launch costs drop and commercial innovation really ramps up, it's quickly becoming a reality. We're looking at a future where the entirely unique conditions of orbit could fundamentally change how we study diseases and how we formulate treatments, right down here on Earth.
So welcome to this explainer. If you happen to be studying pharmacy, pharmaceutical biotechnology, biomedical science, or space medicine, you are in exactly the right place. Today we're going to cautiously explore the emerging research area of space-based pharmaceutical development. Now, we aren't here to overhype early-stage possibilities as established facts. Instead, we're going to look closely at the peer-reviewed data and see exactly what the science is currently telling us about the potential of orbital research.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 01. Space Pharmaceutical Manufacturing. 02. Why the space environment matters. 03. Advanced Pharmaceutical Technologies. 04. Astronaut Health and Disease Models. 05. Space Microbiology. And finally, 06. Limitations and Key Takeaways. Let's get into it.
1. Space Pharmaceutical Manufacturing, defining the orbital laboratory. Historically, space medicine was mostly just about keeping astronauts healthy on missions. But today, the focus has really shifted toward utilizing the unusual environment of microgravity, along with elevated radiation, to investigate complex biological processes. Think about it this way. Down on Earth, gravity acts kind of like a really loud background noise, constantly drowning out subtler chemical and cellular behaviors. By removing that gravity, we essentially unmask processes that are otherwise impossible to observe. It turns orbit into a highly unique laboratory for biomedical science.
02. Why the space environment matters. Escaping Earth's limitations. By comparing standard Earth labs to space, we see a pretty stark contrast. On Earth, our biology and chemistry are totally dominated by gravity. Fluids settle out, heat rises due to convection, and our thick atmosphere shields us from cosmic radiation. But in space environments, like up on the International Space Station or inside automated CubeSats, researchers have access to sustained microgravity and distinct space radiation. Furthermore, they are subjected to incredibly harsh, tightly closed, and constrained mission settings. These really intense factors literally force cells and fluids to behave in entirely different ways, stripping away gravity's influence and exposing the core biological mechanisms underneath. 03. Advanced Pharmaceutical Technologies. Tools of the orbital trade.
Before we get too far, we really need to clarify a few terms that often get mixed up. The pharmaceutical pipeline consists of drug design, which is the initial creation of a molecule. Then there's drug development, which involves testing the drug and researching its physical formulation. And finally, drug manufacturing, which is producing the final product at a massive commercial scale. It's absolutely crucial to note that space research currently focuses heavily on development and testing. Right now, space is a testbed for learning. It's not a factory for mass-producing raw drugs, at least not yet. To actually make this orbital research possible, the technologies have to be drastically miniaturized. Take 3D bioprinting, for example. On Earth, printed biological tissues often just collapse without structural scaffolds because gravity pulls them down. But in microgravity, they don't collapse under their own weight, which allows researchers to build highly complex 3D structures. We're also seeing the use of automated lab-on-a-chip and tissue chip platforms to conduct sophisticated miniaturized disease modeling. This completely bypasses the need for a massive, heavy terrestrial lab setup. Now, one of the most promising areas of formulation research right now is drug crystallization. On Earth, gravity causes fluid turbulence, sedimentation, and convection currents. All of that can lead to flawed or uneven crystals. In microgravity, those forces are effectively eliminated. Imagine trying to build a delicate house of cards on a vibrating table. That's Earth. In space, the table is perfectly still. Molecules can arrange themselves purely through slow, uninterrupted diffusion, which helps stabilize complex protein crystals. While space doesn't automatically produce better drugs, this kind of environment could lead to highly uniform formulations that are much easier to store or administer. 04. Astronaut Health and Disease Models. The human element as a mirror. The harsh space environment triggers physical changes in astronauts that closely mimic accelerated aging and disease states on Earth. We see things like ophthalmic abnormalities, rapid bone and muscle changes, and increased risk for kidney stones and profound cardiovascular shifts. By studying astronauts, researchers essentially get an accelerated, highly observable, and uniquely reversible model of terrestrial diseases. Because astronauts lose bone and muscle mass so rapidly due to the lack of gravitational loading, their bodies provide a truly unique opportunity. For instance, bone demineralization in space can happen at about 1.7% per month in weight-bearing bones. That is an astonishingly fast rate compared to earthly aging, and it closely mimics osteoporosis. Researchers are actually using this environment right now to test therapies like tetranite, which is a synthetic bone glue, to see if it can stimulate bone regeneration. We also see muscle atrophy being studied through the myotones experiment. This painlessly assesses muscle tone and stiffness, offering really valuable insights into conditions like sarcopenia back on Earth. Furthermore, changes in fluid distribution cause systemic stress across the whole body. Astronauts frequently experience spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS, which causes changes in vision and optic disc edema. They also experience cardiovascular deconditioning that mimics aging. And here is a truly surprising discovery. The risk of kidney stones in space isn't just about calcium loss from bones. Recent data suggests it is also deeply linked to shifts in the gut microbiome under the stress of spaceflight. Specifically, we see an increase in Oxalobacter species and a decrease in oxalate-degrading bifidobacterium.
5. Space microbiology. Pathogens in microgravity.
So, as you might guess, microbes do not behave the same way in space. Under the extreme stress of microgravity, bacterial growth and physiology exhibit drastically altered behaviors. We're talking about bacteria actually shrinking in size but developing thicker cell walls as defense mechanism. We also see increased persistence in biofilm formation, creating microbial communities that are much harder to treat. Consequently, antibiotic resistance patterns may also change. All of this is absolutely critical for infection control and for testing the efficacy of new antimicrobial strategies under extreme environmental stress. Interestingly, it is not just about pathogens becoming more stubborn. Exposing fungi to the space environment has occasionally unlocked completely new biological responses. For example, when strains of the fungus Beauveria bassiana were exposed to spaceflight, they produced secondary metabolites that the earthbound control strains just did not produce. This suggests that the unique stress of the space environment could eventually yield novel leads for drug discovery that we simply couldn't trigger down here. We also see some really fascinating potential in oncology. Microgravity induces cancer cells to naturally form complex 3D spheroids. These better mimic how tumors actually grow in human tissue, making them excellent models for preclinical drug testing. Also, remember our discussion earlier about crystallization? Well, Merck conducted an experiment on the ISS with the monoclonal antibody pembrolizumab, which is a cancer treatment. The microgravity environment facilitated the production of a highly uniform crystalline suspension. This kind of data helps researchers formulate versions of the drug that might eventually be given as a quick injection rather than a lengthy intravenous infusion.
06. Limitations and key takeaways.
A grounded reality check. Now, we must be extremely cautious and note that this is still a very early stage field. It is severely limited by astronomical operational costs. I mean, sending literally anything to space is incredibly expensive. Because flights are limited, experimental data often relies on very small sample sizes. Reproducing these findings is exceptionally tough. And the biggest hurdle remains translating what we learn in a microgravity environment back into practical, scalable medical applications for patients on Earth. These are not just minor hiccups, they are massive logistical barriers. We need significantly more standardized studies before space ever becomes a routine part of the pharma pipeline.
To summarize our explainer today, first, space is emerging as a legitimate, albeit highly experimental, platform for pharmaceutical science. Second, microgravity fundamentally alters physical processes, which aids things like complex protein crystallization. Third, advanced miniaturized tools are making orbital disease modeling possible. Fourth, astronaut health and microbial changes give us unique, accelerated models for Earth-based diseases. And fifth, we must always remember that significant financial and operational hurdles still remain.
As we continue to look upward, we really have to ask a profound question. Will the extreme constraints of the space environment ultimately help us break the limits of medicine here on Earth? It is a truly fascinating area of research that sits right at the intersection of aerospace engineering and pharmaceutical science. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the science as this incredible frontier continues to unfold.